They bit off more than they could chew. That's exactly what happened here. My HOA thought they could control me like they controlled everyone else. But they didn't know what I was about to uncover, or how I would fight back once they crossed the line. Picture this. You've just bought your dream home. A quiet street, smiling neighbors, a community you think will finally give you peace. But slowly the cracks begin to show. Notes on your door, letters in your mailbox, strangers watching your every move. At first you think it's paranoia, until you discover something hidden beneath your house that changes everything. A secret your HOA will do anything to protect. They came after me, tried to break me, tried to bury the truth. But I didn't just fight back, I fought back in a way they never saw coming. And this is the full story. Homeowners associations. 3 words that can mean order and beauty or control and abuse. When most people think of an HOA, they imagine simple neighborhood rules. Don't let the grass get too tall. Keep your trash cans out of sight. Maybe make sure your shutters are painted the approved color. Annoying, sure, but manageable. What people don't talk about enough is what happens when an HOA board goes too far. Because at its core, an HOA isn't just about lawns and fences, it's about power. And when a handful of people gain power over an entire neighborhood, with the ability to fine, threaten, and even foreclose on your home, that power becomes dangerous. I wasn't the kind of person looking for a fight. I wanted a calm life, a house I could be proud of, and neighbors I could trust. I bought into my community because it looked safe, clean, and welcoming. The brochure painted a picture of harmony, children playing in the cul-de-sac, and block parties where everyone brought a dish. For the first few weeks, that's exactly how it felt. Neighbors waved, people smiled, and the HOA board introduced themselves as though they were doing me a favor. But beneath that surface, something was off. The HOA wasn't just a group of volunteers keeping things tidy. They carried themselves like gatekeepers, like overseers. Their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. And before long, those smiles turned into warnings, and those warnings turned into threats. It started small, almost laughable. A letter claiming my lawn had too many weeds even though it was freshly mowed. A notice about my mailbox being non-compliant, even though it was the same style as half the neighborhood. I thought it was just bureaucracy, petty but harmless. But then came the things I couldn't explain. Neighbors who used to chat suddenly avoided me. My trash bins were mysteriously knocked over every week, and late at night when the streets were empty, I'd catch glimpses of figures walking past my house, stopping just a little too long in front of my yard. At first I tried to shrug it off. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was just adjusting to a new place. But deep down I knew something wasn't right, and then came the discovery, the moment that turned my annoyance into fear. Beneath my house, hidden behind old boards and dust, I found something that tied me directly into the HOA's darkest secret, something that explained their sudden obsession with me, and once I uncovered it, there was no going back. This is the story of how I went from a quiet homeowner to the enemy of my own HOA, of how they pushed me, cornered me, and tried to silence me, and how I turned the tables on them in a way they never could have imagined. The first real sign of trouble came only a month after moving in. I was still unpacking boxes when I found a bright orange slip taped to my front door. It wasn't a welcome letter, it wasn't an invitation, it was a violation notice. According to the HOA, my grass was over 3 inches tall and visibly neglected. I laughed out loud when I read it. I had literally mowed the lawn 2 days earlier. The grass wasn't just short, it was perfect. I called the number on the notice, expecting it to be a mistake. The woman who answered didn't even pretend to care. She read my address, confirmed the violation, and told me I had 7 days to correct it or face a $150 fine. When I protested, she said something I'll never forget. The board's decision is final. That phrase would come back to haunt me. After that, the letters started coming weekly. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My driveway had visible cracks. A potted plant on my porch was non-compliant. It was absurd. I thought maybe they were just targeting every new homeowner, some sort of hazing ritual. But when I asked a neighbor about it, she shifted uncomfortably and said, "It's best not to argue with the board." That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules. It was about control. Things escalated fast. One night I came home late from work and saw 2 men standing near my side yard. They weren't neighbors, I'd never seen them before. When my headlights hit them, they turned away and walked off quickly, disappearing into the darkness. I brushed it off, but then the next morning I found a new notice in my mailbox. Unauthorized modifications to side property. Pending review. Unauthorized modifications? I hadn't touched a thing, unless they were counting the broken gutter I'd been meaning to fix. But how would they even know about that? Unless someone had been snooping around my property at night. I started to feel paranoid. Every sound outside made me tense. Every letter in my mailbox felt like a threat. And the strangest thing was that nobody else seemed to notice. Or if they did, they weren't talking. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the basement moving some old boxes when I noticed a section of the wall that looked different. It was boarded up with old splintered wood, not concrete like the rest of the foundation. Something about it didn't fit. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed a crowbar and started prying. The wood came loose with a groan, and behind it was a dark, narrow space. At first I thought it was just a crawl space, but when I shined my flashlight inside, I realized it was deeper, much deeper. It wasn't a crawl space. It was a tunnel. The air was damp and stale. The ground sloped downward. I could see it stretching forward, disappearing into darkness. My pulse quickened. What was this doing here? Who built it? Where did it lead? Before I could step inside, a sound from upstairs froze me. A knock at the front door. Not just a knock, a pounding. Heavy, insistent, angry. I crept upstairs, heart racing, and peeked out the window. Standing there, illuminated by my porch light, were 3 members of the HOA board. Their faces were grim. Their fists hammered the door again. They knew. The pounding on my front door didn't stop. It grew louder, faster, more aggressive, like they were daring me to ignore it. My heart hammered in my chest. The timing was impossible. I had just discovered the tunnel beneath my house, and within minutes the HOA board was here. I froze in the shadows, trying to steady my breathing. If I opened the door, they'd see it in my eyes, maybe even on my clothes. Dust, dirt, guilt. They would know I had found something I wasn't supposed to. But if I didn't open it, they would know that too, finally. I forced myself forward, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. 3 board members stood there. Mr. Reynolds, the HOA president, was at the center. He was tall, silver-haired, always wearing a smug expression that suggested he knew something you didn't. To his left was Linda, the vice president, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. On the right was Gary, the enforcer type, thick arms, a permanent scowl. "Evening," Reynolds said smoothly. But there was nothing polite about his tone. "We've had concerns about your property," I swallowed. "At 11 o'clock at night?" Linda leaned forward, peering past me into the house. "We received reports of unauthorized construction, noise complaints, possible structural alterations." I felt my blood run cold. Unauthorized construction. That was too specific. Too close to what I'd just uncovered. "There's no construction here," I said firmly. "I was just moving some boxes." Gary stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "We'll need to conduct an inspection. Make sure everything is up to code." "No," I said immediately. "You don't have the right to just barge into my house." Reynolds smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Actually, according to the bylaws, we do. If there's reason to believe a violation could affect the community, we're permitted to enter and inspect." I knew that wasn't true. At least I hoped it wasn't. But in that moment, logic didn't matter. They wanted in. They wanted the tunnel. I held my ground. "Come back with a warrant." And before they could respond, I slammed the door shut. The pounding returned instantly, shaking the frame. "You're making a mistake!" Reynolds shouted through the wood. "Non-compliance has consequences." I didn't answer. I stood there, fists clenched, listening until finally, mercifully, the pounding stopped. When I looked again, they were gone, but I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I couldn't shake the image of that dark passageway. I needed to know what was down there. I armed myself with a flashlight, gloves, and a camera, then pulled the boards back completely and stepped inside. The tunnel was narrower than I expected, barely wide enough for me to walk through without brushing the walls. The dirt floor was uneven, damp in places, and the air smelled of mold and rust. My footsteps echoed softly, as though the earth itself was listening. I walked carefully, counting my steps. 10, 20, 50. The tunnel stretched farther than I thought, curving gently downward. After what felt like forever, I reached a junction, 2 paths branching left and right. I hesitated, then chose the left. It led to a small chamber, almost like a room carved out of the soil. Old wooden beams supported the ceiling, and in the corner sat a stack of boxes. I knelt, brushing off dust. The boxes were marked with faded handwriting, dates, addresses, and strange abbreviations. I opened one. Inside were files, HOA documents, meeting notes, violation records. But these weren't normal records. They were old, decades old, and many had confidential stamped across them. My hands shook as I flipped through pages. They detailed fines, threats, foreclosures, families forced out of their homes. But some files included things that went beyond HOA business: personal information, medical records, even police reports. Why would an HOA be hiding these underground? As I photographed everything, a noise behind me made me freeze. A faint scrape like a shoe against dirt. I swung my flashlight toward the tunnel. Nothing, just darkness. But I knew I wasn't alone. That night, a new letter appeared in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded paper with a single line. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." No signature, no official letterhead, just a threat. The next day, I found my car keyed. Deep scratches carved into the paint. A week later, my trash bins were overturned again, this time with the contents spread deliberately across the street. Every petty act felt like a warning shot. I went to the police, but as soon as I mentioned the HOA, the officer sighed. "If this is about fines or property disputes, it's a civil matter, not criminal. File a complaint with the county." I tried to explain the threats, the stalking, the tunnel, but the moment I said tunnel, his eyes narrowed with disbelief. "Sir, unless you have concrete evidence, there's nothing we can do." That's when it hit me. The HOA had power not just over the neighborhood, but over perception. To outsiders, they were just a group of volunteers keeping lawns tidy. To us, they were tyrants. And if I wanted to fight back, I'd need proof no one could ignore. I returned to the tunnel, this time following the right-hand path. It sloped farther down, eventually leading to a heavy wooden door. It was old, reinforced with rusted metal bands and padlocked shut. I shined my light around and noticed fresh footprints in the dirt. Someone else had been here recently. Determined, I returned later with bolt cutters. It took everything I had, but eventually the lock snapped. The door groaned open, revealing a much larger chamber beyond. And that's where I found it. Rows of filing cabinets. Metal shelves lined with boxes. A desk with a lamp still plugged into a generator. This wasn't just a hidden room, it was an archive. I opened drawer after drawer, stunned. Bank statements, ledgers, lists of payments. But not just ordinary HOA dues. There were records of massive withdrawals, transfers to offshore accounts, and receipts for maintenance projects that never happened. It was fraud. Millions of dollars siphoned from homeowners over decades. My camera clicked furiously as I documented everything. But then, at the far end of the chamber, I found something worse. A wall covered in photographs. Families from the neighborhood. Kids playing in yards. Parents unloading groceries. All tagged with dates and notes. The HOA wasn't just stealing money. They were watching us, tracking us. After that night, everything changed. My internet started cutting out randomly. My phone rang at odd hours with silence on the other end. Once, I caught a car idling outside my house at 3 a.m. Headlights off, engine barely audible. When I stepped outside, it sped away, and then the notices started piling up faster. Every day, a new violation. My mailbox was leaning. My curtains were non-uniform. Even the birdbath in my yard was deemed non-compliant. The fines stacked into the thousands. Reynolds showed up at my door again, this time with a fake smile. "You know, foreclosure is a shameful process, but if you just cooperate, we can make this all disappear." I told him I wasn't selling. His smile vanished. "Then don't say I didn't warn you." The last straw came one night when I was in the tunnel again, gathering more evidence. I heard footsteps, clear, deliberate, coming closer. I killed my flashlight and held my breath. The sound grew louder. Someone else was down here. Multiple people. Their voices echoed faintly. "He's been snooping too much." Reynolds wants it handled. Panic surged through me. They were hunting me. I crept back toward the entrance, heart pounding. Dirt crumbled under my shoes, louder than gunfire in the silence. I made it to the boarded wall just as their flashlights cut through the tunnel behind me. I slipped through, shoved the boards back in place, and pressed against the wall, trembling. The light swept past the cracks, beams of white slicing through the dark. I held still, praying they wouldn't find the opening. Finally, after what felt like hours, the voices faded. The tunnel was silent again, but I knew now they weren't just trying to scare me. They were trying to trap me. That was the night I realized the tunnel wasn't just a secret, it was a weapon. And if I wanted to survive, I'd have to turn it against them. The next time I went down there, I wasn't just looking for evidence. I was ready for war. The next time I entered the tunnel, I wasn't just a terrified homeowner. I was prepared. I carried 2 flash drives, multiple cameras, and a body cam strapped beneath my jacket. I had already uploaded copies of the documents I'd collected to cloud storage. If anything happened to me, the truth would still come out. The tunnel seemed darker than ever, the air colder. My flashlight beam shook slightly as I moved, but this time I wasn't running away. I was going deeper. At the far chamber, the one with the filing cabinets and photographs, I heard voices again. Only this time I didn't hide. I stepped forward. Reynolds was there, along with Linda and Gary, plus 2 other board members I hadn't seen before. They froze when my light hit them. Papers and files were spread across the desk, and one of them had a shredder humming in the corner. They were destroying evidence. Reynolds recovered first, his tone dripping with contempt. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" I raised my camera. "Everyone's going to know what you've been hiding down here." Gary started toward me, fists clenched. "Put it down," but I didn't. Instead, I hit a button on my body cam, projecting the live stream to my laptop upstairs. Already recording. Already backed up. Try me. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Reynolds' eyes. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he hissed. "This isn't just about our neighborhood. You're poking into things bigger than you can handle." Linda snapped, her voice shrill. "He's lying. He's bluffing. Grab him." The room erupted into chaos. Gary lunged, but I swung my flashlight hard, catching him across the shoulder. He staggered back with a curse. Another board member grabbed at my arm, but I twisted free, knocking over a cabinet. Files spilled everywhere, fluttering to the ground like snow. Reynolds shouted over the noise, "Do you think anyone will believe you? You're just one homeowner against an entire board. We'll bury you in lawsuits before you can blink." I laughed bitterly, adrenaline surging. "You've already buried enough people." "Not anymore." For a split second, we all froze, the air thick, the tension unbearable. And then a sound cut through the room. Sirens, faint but growing louder. Reynolds' face drained of color. Linda screamed at the others to grab what they could, but it was too late. I had tipped off a friend outside the community before coming down here. I had sent him the files, the threats, the tunnel photos. He called the county sheriff. The tunnel erupted into chaos. Flashlights swung wildly. Papers burned in a metal bin as they tried desperately to erase evidence. But when the officers stormed in from the other side, the entrance I hadn't known existed, it was over. Hands where we can see them. The HOA board froze, caught red-handed in their own lair. Reynolds tried one last time to talk his way out. But the sight of the files, the shredder, the photographs on the wall, it was undeniable. I stood there, shaking, watching as they were handcuffed one by one. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The days that followed were surreal. News crews swarmed the neighborhood. Reporters called it the Tunnel HOA scandal. Headlines screamed about fraud, embezzlement, illegal surveillance. Neighbors who once avoided me now approached with wide eyes, asking if it was true. It was true, and worse than they knew. Investigators uncovered decades of corruption. Reynolds and several board members had been skimming money from dues, laundering it through fake maintenance projects and threatening families who got suspicious. The tunnel was their secret archive, their insurance policy, their way of keeping everything hidden. But it wasn't just about money. The photographs, the files, they had been watching residents, keeping tabs on their private lives. Anyone who pushed back too hard suddenly found themselves fined into foreclosure or pressured to move. The entire board was dissolved. New elections were held, and for the first time the neighborhood felt free. People came together, united not by fear but by relief. As for me, I was exhausted. Months of tension had worn me down, but I also felt vindicated. The sleepless nights, the paranoia, the constant threats, it all led to this moment. And though it wasn't easy, I knew one thing for certain. I had done the right thing. The tunnel was sealed permanently. County workers filled it with concrete, erasing the physical scar from beneath our homes. But the memory of it, the weight of what it represented, will never truly disappear. Sometimes I still wake up at night, expecting to hear footsteps in the dirt below. Sometimes I see shadows outside my window and wonder if someone else is watching, but then I remember the truth is out now, and they can't hurt me anymore. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this is that silence feeds corruption. HOAs, companies, governments, any group with unchecked power thrives on fear and secrecy. But when you shine a light, when you refuse to back down, that power crumbles. If you've ever dealt with an HOA, you probably know how powerless it can make you feel. The constant notices, the unfair fines, the feeling that your own home isn't really yours. That's how they win, by convincing you that resistance is pointless. But my story proves something different. They're not invincible. When you push back with truth, with evidence, with courage, their threats lose their power, and that's why I'm sharing this story with you. Not just because it happened to me, but because it could happen to anyone. These neighborhoods, these organizations, they look ordinary from the outside, but you never really know what's going on beneath the surface. Sometimes literally. So if this story shocked you, if it made you think twice about who really holds the power in our communities, then please help spread it. Hit that like button. Share this video with your friends and family. Drop a comment below if you've ever had your own HOA nightmare, or if you want me to share more stories like this. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because trust me, this isn't the only story of hidden power and secret corruption I've uncovered. This was the fight of my life. And I fought back in a way they never saw coming.